53 BC. The deserts of northern Mesopotamia. The richest man in Rome stands surrounded, his legions broken, his son's severed head paraded on a spear before his eyes. Within hours, he will be dead too, and legend says his executioners will pour molten gold down his throat, mocking the greed that brought him here. This is the Battle of Carrhae, the disaster that humiliated the Roman Republic. To understand Carrhae, you have to understand Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest man in Rome, a master of real estate, slaves, and silver mines, a man who had once famously said, no one could call themselves wealthy unless they could afford to raise their own army. But money wasn't enough for Crassus. He stood alongside Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great in the so-called First Triumvirate, an unofficial alliance that ruled Rome from the shadows. The problem was, Caesar had Gaul. Pompey had crushed pirates and kings across the east. Crassus had money. He wanted glory. He wanted a war of his own. So in 55 BC, without the Senate's full approval, Crassus set his sights on the one power that still stood defiantly beyond Rome's reach: the Parthian Empire, ruling Persia and Mesopotamia from horseback. In 53 BC, at nearly 60 years old, Crassus marched roughly 7 legions, some 40,000 men, across the Euphrates River and into Parthian territory. He ignored the advice of a local king, Artavasdes of Armenia, who urged him to take a safer mountain route where Parthian cavalry couldn't maneuver freely. Crassus refused. He wanted speed. He wanted the shortest road to glory. Instead, he marched his legions straight into the open desert plains near the city of Carrhae, terrain that could not have been more perfectly suited to his enemy. Waiting for him was a Parthian force under the general Surena, reportedly only around 10,000 men, vastly outnumbered by the Roman legions. But numbers meant little here. Surena's army was built entirely around 2 devastating tools: heavily armored cataphract lancers and thousands of horse archers. And Surena had prepared something else: an enormous baggage train of camels carrying nothing but spare arrows. Endless arrows. When the armies met on the open plain, Crassus formed his legions into a massive defensive square, hoping to protect his flanks. It didn't matter. The Parthian horse archers simply rode in wide circles around the entire Roman formation, firing wave after wave of arrows into the packed ranks below. This tactic would become infamous: the Parthian Shot. Archers firing backward at full gallop even while retreating, never allowing the Romans a moment to close the distance and fight back. Crassus's son Publius led a desperate cavalry charge to break the encirclement, chasing the horse archers as they feigned retreat. It was a trap. Publius and his men were lured away from the main army, surrounded, and annihilated. Days later, his head was raised on a spear and paraded before his father's demoralized legions. What followed wasn't a quick battle. It was a slow, grinding execution. The Roman shield wall, the famous testudo, offered some protection, but the cataphract lancers would smash into any gap, and the arrows never stopped falling. Roman historian Plutarch described the Parthian arrows as so relentless that soldiers begged simply to be allowed to charge and die fighting, rather than stand and be shot down helplessly. By nightfall, the Roman army was shattered. Thousands dead, thousands more wounded, and Crassus himself paralyzed by grief and indecision. Under the cover of darkness, the surviving Romans attempted to retreat toward the city of Carrhae. Many made it. Crassus did not. Lured into a final negotiation with Surena, supposedly to discuss peace terms, Crassus was killed in the chaotic meeting along with his remaining officers. Ancient sources claim the Parthians later mocked his legendary greed in a gruesome way, pouring molten gold into his mouth, a symbolic punishment for the wealth that had driven him to invade in the first place. Whether that detail is fact or dramatic legend, one thing is certain. Crassus, the richest man in Rome, died in the desert, and his head was later used as a prop in a Greek play performed at the Parthian royal court. Of the roughly 40,000 Romans who marched into Parthia, historians estimate around 20,000 were killed and another 10,000 captured. It was one of the worst military disasters in Roman history. And unlike Adrianople centuries later, this defeat came not from external chaos, but from one man's stubborn pursuit of personal glory. The political fallout was immediate. With Crassus dead, the fragile balance of the first triumvirate collapsed. Only Caesar and Pompey remained, and without a third power to check them, their rivalry would soon spiral into civil war. A war that would ultimately end the Roman Republic itself.
Carrhae shattered Rome's aura of invincibility in the East for generations. The legendary Roman legions, masters of disciplined infantry warfare, had been humiliated by a numerically smaller force of horsemen. It would take Rome decades to recover captured military standards lost that day, eventually returned only through diplomacy under Emperor Augustus. But perhaps the most lasting consequence wasn't military, it was political. Crassus's death removed the final restraint holding Caesar and Pompey together. One man's greed for glory helped unravel a republic. Within 4 years, Rome would be at war with itself. If you want to see how that rivalry between Caesar and Pompey finally exploded into civil war, let us know in the comments. That story might be next.